Okay, today's lesson is on how to calculate the power supply needs for a specific computer system. Basically, every system, dependent on what's in it, has different needs for what wattage or total power it's pulled. Again, just to review from last time when we talked about it in class, watts equals total power, and that's computed by finding volts times amps, which is electrical potential multiplied by the current going through that potential. So every single device in a computer is pulling some kind of power, and depending on how much total things are in the computer is how much wattage that computer needs to pull. If we go ahead and put a power supply inside a computer and don't pay attention to what the wattage is, for instance, this power supply is a 500 watt, and it says 500 W power supply on the side, then what we can end up with is either things not working, the power supply burning up, or the PC never turning on at all. I did mention last class that what we do is we calculate that, and we can always have a bigger number, we just don't ever want a smaller number when we come up with our power supply. So we're going to look at some PCs today, and I'm going to show you how to calculate the number. Now, to bring you to some terms that are my terms. First of all, we're going to be doing the math to find out the calculated wattage, and that's a total number. Okay, so we're going to add together all the parts that are in a PC, and we're going to come up with some calculated number, and the calculated number is the total of all the devices in the PC that we're saying it needs this. Okay, and then my terms then are, the next one is minimum, and that's the calculated rounded to the next 50. So if we come up with a calculated of 293, that's the calculated. The minimum then is 300. If we come up with 300, the minimum then is 350. It's rounded up to the next 50. Okay, so if this is calculated, this is minimum, and then we add 50 from there, and we get what I call as the recommended. So I would recommend a power supply of 350 watts or 400 watts for this particular pseudo PC. So we calculate, we round up to get the minimum, and we add 50 to get the recommended. And I'll kind of show you why. Power supplies don't come in every single flavor. In general, they used to only come in 50 watt increments. Now they come in a few more increments. In fact, if we go to Newegg, look on the side, when we look for a power supply, we can say what wattage we're looking for, and you can see they have a 500, they have some 520s, they have some 525s, a couple 530s, but as we look at the biggest number, there's 436 500 watt ones, there's 375 550s, and so and there's 408 600s. The majority of power supplies still come in 50 watt increments. So that's why, or that's how we're going to calculate things, is based on those 50 watt increments, because the other ones are misnomers. They don't happen all the time. So there are two ways that I teach students to calculate. The first way is to kind of get you to the second way and understanding a little better, and it's what I call my laundry list. Okay, so I have made, from my experience from looking at sites and from doing research, what I call this laundry list of general numbers that show the wattages of typical PC components. Okay, so none of them are exact, and they're all rounded up. So you can assume that if you come up with a number with my chart, that you're going to at least be safe. You might end up with too big of a power supply with my chart, but you're never going to end up with too small. And bigger is better in the case of power supplies, to a financial limit. So what basically this means is that as we look at a PC, we're going to look and say, okay, every PC has a motherboard. So we're going to allocate 100 watts of power to the motherboard and to the minor things that the motherboard powers, okay? Every PC is going to have RAM, and we're going to say we're going to add 5 watts for every stick of RAM that's in that PC. So if we've got this PC over here that's got 8 sticks of RAM in it, we would say we've got 100 watts for this. I'm going to pick a different pin that's not so ginormous while I'm writing. Yeah, smaller pin here. I'm going to go with this one. Okay, so we've got 100 watts for our motherboard. If we've got 8 sticks of RAM, 8 times 5 is 40 watts for our RAM. And then we go down and only one of these, only one processor is going to apply. Actually, in that one there's 2, but we'll pretend there's 1. So there's kind of a jump. And most processors that use between 1 and 8 cores are actually around 65, but can be as high as 85. So I rounded up and said 100. So if it's a 1 through 8 core processor, we're going to say 100. If it's, I said 8 through 16, I meant 9 through 16 cores, or a Threadripper, because they require a lot of power. That's a specific kind of processor made by AMD. We're going to say 200, and if it's got over 16 cores, we're going to say 250. There's a 32 core one that uses 250, and that's relatively rare. But anyway, so if we're going to say that, so in the case of this one, it's got 8 cores, so we would say that it's got, we're going to just pretend it's only got 1 in there right now. We're going to say that it needs 100 watts of power for that. There's 3 kind of graphics cards listed on here. There's low end, mid range, and high end. And when we say high end, I should have written on here, anytime a PC says it's a gamer, we're going to assume, sometimes incorrectly, but we're going to assume that it's a high-end graphics card, because it shouldn't be selling something as a gamer PC unless it is a high-end graphics card. Low-end, it's hard because we haven't done the graphics section right now, but we're going to kind of assume as we go through this that it either is a low-end or a high-end. So it's either gamer or low-end. If it's integrated, there's no cost, because we've actually rolled that cost into the wattage of the motherboard. So it's got to have an add-on video card. If it's a low-end video card, basically like what we've got for all the teacher computers right now, it's a relatively low-end graphics card. We'd say that's consumes about 50 watts, and a high-end can be as much as 250. That's the worst high-end gamer card, but again, this is a rough estimate as we go through, and we're going to do a couple PCs here. Then we have to look at what kind of drives are on the computer. If it's got a CD, DVD, Blu-ray, and then conventional spinny drives, and that's per drive. Solid state drives use far less, and high speed 10,000 or 15,000 speed drives you use more. So we're going to kind of go through this like it's a grocery list, check off the things that the particular PC has, and then add them all together to get the calculated number. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do one for a mystery PC. I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to pull up one on Newegg right now. So I'm going to go to Newegg, and we're going to go to Home, and we're going to calculate the power for a computer system that we pull up on Newegg. So I'm going to go to a gaming desktop, and again, we just said it's gaming. It's listed as gaming, so we're going to assume it has a high-end gamer video card, which is going to be the first one on the list. And we'll go through here and we'll see how good this power supply is for the system that we're going to build. So I'm going to try to shrink this a little bit and fit it so we can get both on the screen at the same time. We'll see how well this works. If it won't let me, it's not going to let me grab the corner of that, is it? Oh, there we go. Let's see if I can slide that in. Hopefully we can still read this on the screen as you're watching this. While I bring this one up over here, we show them at the same time. Let's see how this goes. Good enough. Okay, so first of all, does it have a motherboard? Yeah, of course it has a motherboard. Everything is a motherboard. So there's 100 there that we're going to have for a motherboard. Our RAM, how much RAM does it have? Now, as we look at these, and you guys are going to get links that you're going to go through and do this, we have to actually go and read through, and I know you guys haven't done this before. So the best way to do it is to come down here and look at the specifications. So I'm going to go down here to memory. It says 8 gig right here, 8 GB, 8 gigabytes of DDR4. We're going to assume that anytime it says it's got 8 gig and doesn't specify, we're going to assume these are 2 4 gigs, because my experience is that whenever they can put less expensive RAM in, they do. So we're going to assume those are 2 4 gig sticks. If it said 16, we would assume 2 8 gig sticks. If it said 32, we would assume 4 8 gig sticks, because 16 gig sticks get appreciably more expensive. So most of the time, if they don't list what it is, it's probably going to be a 4 gig or an 8 gig stick in there, and they're going to do the least expensive. So since it doesn't say how many sticks, we're going to go with 2 8 gig sticks. So we're going to say that it's got 10 watts for that. And then the number of processors, it is a 64-bit 6-core processor. So we're going to say the 1 to 8, so we're going to add 100 here for that. Graphics card, we already said it's a gaming system, so we're going to use the high-end graphics card number. And again, this is the maximum that any GeForce video card uses, so I'm being conservative on this chart. Drives, let's see what kind of drives we've got on this thing. And sometimes, I will tell you, to figure these things out, you have to look at the pictures, but let's see what we've got down here. The video card. Okay, down here in memory, it still only says that it's 8 gig. So storage, it's got a solid state drive. I'm looking for anything else. I don't see anything about a DVD drive. We're going to look at the pictures then. And I frequently tell students that they have to look at the pictures to figure it out, because sometimes they don't list stuff, and yet it's in there, audio port, USB. I don't think there is one. I don't think there's any DVD drive in this one. We can zoom in, see what we see. I see no front side drives in this one. So all we've got in this one is a 512 gig solid state drive. And I'm just checking as my specs. By ASUS, there's my processor, memory, storage. Don't see anything else on there. Okay, so we're gonna go with nothing, solid state drive 5. Okay, that's all the drives we see. And then down in other, you're gonna learn what an SCSI or a SCSI card is. I'm not gonna pick anyone that has that right now. An extra sound card. The motherboard sound is rolled into that 100 watts on the motherboard. This is if it had an extra one. Modem, any other PCI cards. Now, I didn't see anything, and again, the only way to know for sure is to look at a picture of the back. And I don't know if it gave us a picture of the back of this case, which is very, I'm going to say, abnormal. Almost always you get a good rear panel shot of a computer, and there is none on this one whatsoever. Let's see if there's anything else listed on here, and I don't see anything else. So I don't see a sound card, don't see a modem, don't see any other PCI cards. However, cooling fans, I said that it's 3 watts, if you can't read that, 3 watts per fan, and I'm going to have to look at the pictures again, because let's see if we find any fans on this. I can see one right there. I really wish there was a picture of the back. I don't see any up top. Let's see if we can see anything else in there. It's got a really nice CPU cooler in there. I'm really happy with that CPU cooler in there. But the only fan I saw was that one. We're going to look down here at the specs a little more and see if it lists anything else. Sometimes under cooling, we have a USB keyboard and mouse, and I specifically said we're not going to include those in the calculations because I included that with the 100 watts on the motherboard. Anything else? Let's see. It's got a network card that's part of the motherboard, Bluetooth part of the motherboard, wireless part of the motherboard. I don't see anything else listed on this one. So we're going to list one cooling fan, and then we're going to do our math. Okay? So we're going to say one fan here. So we've got 210 plus 250, 460, 468. I'm pretty sure I did my math right there. 100, 210, 468. Okay, so our calculated is 468, which would make our minimum 500, and our recommended 550. Let's see on this one, and I know it's on there. Okay, so it's got a 500 watt gold plus power supply. It definitely meets our minimum calculation on there. It doesn't meet our recommended, but realizing that all of these numbers are ones that I did using worst case scenario. So I would say this is pretty good. Now I will tell you that I have seen pre-built computers not match the minimum power that we came up with. It definitely meets the minimum here, so I would say this system is fine. That's one way that we can calculate. And we're going to do this again on a couple other ones, but the next way that you're going to see that's listed in the book. So if we go in the middle book here, we're going to do it that way as well. That's not what I'm talking about. We look at the chapter 3 book, and by the way, you can't see this lesson if you didn't read the book and pick up the stash that's in chapter 4. So if I go to chapter 4, do the math, there's some stash at the end down here you have to make sure you pick up as a reminder, and you won't know that if you didn't already do it. So there's my calculator, the sheet that we were just looking at, and then there's online calculators. And online calculators are much more accurate because they look at the exact component you're talking about to see if they work. And I've got two different online calculators here. One that I'm calling a basic calculator from Newegg, where there's very few things. How did I just get there? What just happened? Oh, very few things on here. So it says, what's my CPU? This one's an Intel 90. I'm going to zoom in a bit. i5 9400F. Intel i5 9400F right there. Okay, so I picked my CPU. My motherboard is an ATX motherboard. You can see it's calculating as we go on. My graphics processor is a GTX 1660. GTX 6. Oops, wrong one. Our graphics is a NVIDIA GTX 1660. No, that's a 1060. 1660. I don't think it was a TI. Nope. GTX 1660. Memory, we've got 8 gig of DDR4. And I said to say we had 4 gig sticks, really times 2. Doesn't change it by that much. You see it only changed by a couple watts. Solid state drive in this one is a 512 gig solid state drive. No secondary hard drive, no optical drive. So this one is saying 307 watts. And this is a very, very, when I said basic, I meant basic. And of course then it's going to say, oh, hey, we'll take you straight to where you can buy that from us. The what I call, it says intermediate, I should call it advanced. You have two options here, basic and expert. If we go on basic, it's kind of an intermediate one, so I just say, I don't say the specific model of the motherboard, I just say it's a desktop or a server motherboard. I have one 9400 i5 9400 CPU. I've got two DDR4 4 gig modules. I've got an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660 video card. I've got one SSD, and it doesn't, you can see SSDs take, it doesn't even care what the size of it is on this calculator. It's just either an SSD or an M2 SSD. Past that, these are all spinny drives. So one SSD on there, no optical drive. How much am I going to use it? I'm a busy gamer. I'm going to say 16 hours a day. Am I doing gaming? Yes, I'm gonna say I'm gaming 2 hours a day on this rig. I probably should say I use that, but okay. So I'm gonna calculate. So this one's coming up that the wattage. How close is that to the other one? 307 versus 303. That's pretty darn close between them. Now this is the calculated. Mine would say add 50. They add 50 to theirs and call it recommended. There's no such thing as a 353, so you have to get something bigger than that. So the way my work comes out is, here's that number, you round up to 350, add 50, you get 400, and I would say I recommend a 400 watt power supply, which again is way higher than this 550, and that's because all those numbers were rounded up. So if I was doing it, these are just two different ways, and the chart is to get you just kind of used to looking for things, but this lets you go through the drop down and really pick things out. Now that's on the basic one. If I go expert, I start picking other things like LEDs. It did have LEDs on it. I'm gonna say it's LED light strip. I don't know if you saw that on there, but the thing had a whole bunch of LED lights, and see all the LED lights up there. So it has even more things that you can pick. It's an LED light strip. This one takes into account that it's got a 120 millimeter fan, no liquid cooling. I've already got, oh, it didn't keep all my other stuff. I thought it would keep it as I moved over there. So you can see it has more options here, even whether I'm going to overclock my CPU and things like that. And this gets even more exact when you go to the expert one. So that's the basics. We're going to go through one more PC. I'm going to go to desktop computers and not pick a gaming this time. Let's just pick out a cheapy one. I'm going to say VFX series. That looks pretty cheap. Let's go with this iPower desktop computer, and we'll go through and run through this one and see how this one comes up with power as well. So let me go ahead and erase this. And we'll kind of go through it again. So we know that our motherboard, we're gonna throw in 100, and again, that's the highest I've found for any motherboard. Most of them do not pull that much power. RAM, it says 8 gig, which I'm gonna say again, we're gonna say is 2 4s, but let's see specifications. I'm gonna roll down here. I don't know if I'm on specification, I'm not. Let's see if it says anything more about memory. Nope, but we're gonna say 2 sticks anyway. So we're gonna say 10 watts there for the memory. The how many processors, we should be able to see that here. CPU. It doesn't say. Let's see if it says up top. Does not. So what do? We have to Google it. So I'm going to take this processor right here, the AMD FX, and I'm going to use search Google. And so I'm going to go right down here, FX 630, AMD, and see if we can find out how many cores this one has. Hello, thank you for the wonderful load on the website. Let's see if we get that. Okay, there we go. So it's got 6 cores. 6 cores, 6 threads. So now we're gonna add 100 watts. Let's see if it shows on here what the wattage is. And look, it says the default's 95. So 100 watts is a pretty good guess for this machine. We're 5 watts off, so we're gonna do 100 watts here for the processor. Let's go and see, does it even have a graphics card? Or let's look at some pictures here. I like looking at the pictures just so we get a chance to see it. That is one. Okay, so I can see we got one fan there. And as I'm looking here, there may be a graphics card there. Wow, that's I don't think there is. I really can't tell if That's a graphics card, some kind of a, let's go down here to graphics. GeForce GT 710. By the way, that's what we've got the teachers' machines. That is a very low-end card, and I'm going to say that it's not integrated because it says it's got a gig of RAM and it specifies a separate graphics card, so that must be a 710. So we're going to use the low-end graphics card there. So we'll add 50 for that. And then what kind of drives do we have? I see 120 gig solid state drive. Wow, that's really small for the only drive on a machine. It says it's for student or home office. 8 gig RAM, 120 gig. I see nothing for, oh, no optical drive, says right there. Nothing else, but we did see one fan. So we're going to say one solid state drive, so we're going to add 5 here. No sound card, no modem, no other cards. And we're going to say 3 for that. So we've got 210, 260, 268. So we're going to round that up to 300 and say we'd like it to have 350 watt as Mr. Poole's recommended. So we got calculated, minimum, recommended, and those are numbers that I will be asking for on tests, those 3 things. Okay, so what's it got in it? I think we did better on this one than the other one even. I thought I saw it had a 400 watt power supply. By the way, this is old RAM too. It's DDR3, so this is an older motherboard. There we go. It's got a 400 watt power supply. So we're over, this is over what our recommended is. And we could go through and use the power calculator and do the same thing. But basically this is about, you guys haven't practiced doing it. The video is to show you the basics of how we're figuring that out. So you guys are going to go through now, and there's 5 different PCs you're going to go through, and there's a wattage worksheet that you can download or use Cami to edit on your PC, however you want to do it, or you can just look at the picture and do it on a scrap piece of paper, and you're going to figure out these things here. And you're going to do it both ways on we'll call it the Poole way, and then we'll call it the calculated way using the website, and then there'll be a series of questions on those. So you need to figure those out first and then go into the test, because if you go into the test first, you don't have access to what the PCs are, although you could leave them open in your browser and that would be fine. So you're going to go through and find calculated, minimum, and recommended. I do want to point out, and we talked about this last class a little bit. If I go and say my recommended is a 400 watt power supply, I can find anything from 400 watts on and be happy. The farther away this number is from what we buy, say we buy a 600, the cooler and the more efficiently the power supply will run. There's a point of diminishing returns though. If this runs a little more efficiently and a little bit cooler, that's great. It also is making it so I can add a better video card and I can expand my PC by buying something farther away from that recommended number. But as we look at the prices of power supplies, the prices go up by really what the wattage is. So I can look at, in fact, I'm just going to click less than 400 and then jump all the way up here to 800 and more. So I'm going to just kind of show you the realm of them. I'm going to go to the lowest price first. So I can get a, let's see if we can get one that's actually ATX, because those are not ATX. Okay, so all the way down here, refurbished, I want to say new too. Where's the new button? Refurbished. By the way, whenever we do parts in this class, we don't look at refurbished. Okay, so this Dell 250 watt power supply is $26. This 250 is $34. This 800 watt is, I don't even know what the name, I've never heard of that before. I almost think that's
that's almost junk. This is an ATX, that shouldn't even be on the list. 300 watt, $37. And then when we go down here, all of a sudden we can look at the 850, 379. This 850 is 193. So there's a point where efficiency, I may save a nickel a year for having it further away, but if I spent $300 to get there, it's just not a good financial thing for us. So more efficient and cooler, but and I want the expansion ability, right? So when I look at that, if I was building a basic PC and say I was using an integrated video card and I came out with 450, I would honestly want something that was 200 watts better at least, so that I could add a high-end video card and have a better system without having to replace my power supply. But much more than that, and all of a sudden I'm spending a lot of money for a lot of nothing. It's not going to help me that much. Okay, so that's the end of the lesson part. I'm going to, below this video, you should see some links, a little bit of reading, and then the links to the 5 PCs that you're going to go take a look at and calculate the power supplies for. You guys are allowed to help each other, by the way, and if someone in the class is like, I don't know what'd you use for memory, you guys are allowed to talk about that. That's perfectly fine.